Why the Boston Red Sox should absolutely pursue Shane Bieber this offseason.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Maljanian, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I'm here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And do you want to know the best part? It's free. So make sure that you tune in because Locked On is here for you every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Sound intriguing? Good. Keep tuning in because I'm going to tell you a little bit about it later on in today's show. But Shane Bieber is a free agent. Why the Boston Red Sox should sign him this offseason is all coming up on today's show, as well as Trevor Story is here to stay and Jarren Duran avoids arbitration. So this is that time of year now where players can choose to opt in or opt out of contracts. And if they opt out, they can become free agents. If they opt in, it means they stay. And Trevor Story opted into his contract with the Boston Red Sox. So I'll be talking about what that means. But this is also the time of year where teams can start thinking about their team needs and who can help fill those needs from a free agent and trade standpoint. Now, if the Red Sox are serious about being World Series contenders in 2026, they are going to have to make some aggressive moves this offseason. And at least one of those moves is going to have to come for starting pitching. Now, I've talked a lot about potential pieces that the Red Sox could trade for when it comes to starting pitching. But what about free agents? Because there are some free agents on the market who could be a fit. Obviously, if they go out and they trade for somebody like Joe Ryan or Sandy Alcantara, that would be nice and would really round out the rotation. But if they don't want to have to give up this massive package for a starting pitcher, there are some guys available in free agency who could help the Red Sox without feeling like they're fully breaking the bank either. Because the Red Sox, they don't like committing really long-term contracts to starting pitchers. They just don't do that anymore. Now, they extended Garrett Crochet because he's really young and he's going to be the ace of the pitching staff for years to come. But you don't see the Red Sox being willing to commit to that kind of deal every day. So if they do look on the free agent market, they're going to try to bolster their starting rotation by looking for somebody who may be a little bit on the cheaper side. And one of those starters who's really intriguing to me is Shane Bieber. I have heard that the Red Sox may be interested in him since they do have options at starting pitcher. They may be a little bit more down to go after a guy like Bieber than to go and try to trade for a guy like Tarek Skubal, who's going to require a Crochet-like extension. So, given though that they do have those options, that doesn't necessarily mean that just sticking with internal options is the correct route to take. Yes, they have talent and guys who could start for the Red Sox in 2026 and be good. But there's something about having a steady presence at number 2. And Shane Bieber is a guy who could fit that mold for Boston because he pitched really well for the Blue Jays down the stretch. And he's a guy who they could slot in behind Garrett Crochet and feel like they have some consistency in that rotation. He was actually somebody who was intrigued by Boston last year because last offseason, Boston was the only place that he visited when looking for a new team. And then he ultimately ended up re-signing with Cleveland. And the 30-year-old definitely continued to help his stock with his postseason performance with the Toronto Blue Jays. So Shane Bieber coming to Boston wouldn't be super far-fetched because of the fact that he may be interested due to the fact that he visited there. And this isn't the first time also that Shane Bieber's name has been mentioned for the Red Sox by any means. It's not even the first time this offseason that he's been mentioned and floated around for this Boston Red Sox team. He's a talented pitcher with a lot of upside, which is a big pro if the Red Sox were to acquire him. But what makes him truly stand out in this free agent class is the fact that he isn't likely to be as expensive as a guy like Framber Valdez or Dylan Cease, because Bieber could bring the Red Sox the same type of value that those guys could at a significantly lower cost. For example, it's estimated that he would likely land a $63 million deal this offseason, and compared to something crazy like $196 million for Valdez and $174 million for Cease. So that's a big difference there. Bieber did miss most of the 2025 season, but was shut down in the playoffs, like pitched very, very well for Toronto. And if the Red Sox are looking to add specifically through free agency, he would be a fit. Now, my worry is obviously there's always downsides to everything. There's no perfect scenario. And with Bieber, my worry with him would be, is he going to stay healthy? Because since he missed a lot of the 2025 season, do we know that he would be able to be relied upon to be a consistent starter in 2026? Or are the Red Sox going to have to worry about health issues like they did with Lucas Giolito? That would be something that I would be concerned about when it comes to the Red Sox potentially acquiring Shane Bieber, would be, is he going to be able to stay healthy? The other concern that I have with that along those same lines is, would we end up with a Walker Buehler type of situation? Because on paper, Walker Buehler seemed like a good idea for the Boston Red Sox at the time. He was coming out of a lights out performance in the World Series in 2024 for the Dodgers, in which he was absolute nails against that Yankees lineup. So going into the 2025 season, the Red Sox decided to take a flyer on him for cheap on a 1-year deal. And there could have been a lot of upside to that. He could have been the absolute steal of free agency, but it didn't really go that way. It ended up being a situation in which he was a liability for the Red Sox out of the rotation, and it just really wasn't working. So then they moved him to the bullpen, and it wasn't working out there for him either. So he ultimately ended up getting cut by the Red Sox. So that could be the type of scenario that we see here. When it comes to Shane Bieber, my worry would be, would he be as effective as the Red Sox would need him to be? Because you never really know with guys who miss a lot of the season due to injury, how they're going to look when they come back from that. And he came back and pitched really well in the playoffs, similar to what we saw from Walker Buehler when he came back from injury in 2024 and pitched very effectively in the postseason. So there was a level of excitement surrounding Buehler heading into 2025 because of that playoff performance that he had. But when it comes to the way he actually performed in reality versus hopes, they weren't really comparable. So if the Red Sox were to bring in Bieber, that is also a risk to take. Was he good down the stretch for the Blue Jays? Yes, but he did miss a majority of the season, and I would just be worried that if the Red Sox were to bring him in and commit to a good amount of money for him, what would he actually be giving them for a product? He has really good stuff. I really like a lot of what he produces when he's on. And I think the biggest thing to remember about Bieber is that he does have a lot of experience pitching in the AL, which could help for the Red Sox when it comes to him pitching against their opponents. But he does have 5 solid pitches that he uses, between a 4-seamer that he uses 36% of the time, a slider that's 20% of the time, a curveball that's 19% of the time, a changeup that's 13% of the time, and a cutter that's also 13% of the time. So none of those 5 pitches he uses to the point where it's basically non-existent. He uses all 5 of those pitches enough to where they can be competitive. And that's what intrigues me about Bieber, is that he has a big arsenal and a lot of pitches that he can utilize, which is something that the Red Sox certainly could benefit from. But the issue, again, stems from, is his arm going to be healthy enough to the point where he can be effective, or are we going to get another Walker Buehler situation? But the Red Sox should absolutely take a flyer on him, see how much it's going to take to sign him, because if they can add him into their rotation, as a solid number 2 or number 3 starter, that could be a game changer for the rotation, but it isn't if because of the risks with him. So we'll have to see if the Red Sox are willing to take those risks. If they are not willing to take those risks, there are other free agent options they can pursue, or they can continue to look on the trade market and try to trade for any of the starting pitchers that I have discussed on this show. So they could go multiple directions with this, but if they want someone who's not going to be insanely costly and isn't going to break the bank for them, and they want somebody who's more of a little bit of a sure thing, they could go after Shane Bieber. They just have to be prepared for the risks that come with that. And I would just be bummed out if the Red Sox were to go after him and then he ended up not being as effective. But we'll have to see how that goes, because he could be a pitcher that could be a complete game changer for this Boston Red Sox rotation. So I have no doubt they should at least check it out and see what he's going for. Coming up, some good news for the Red Sox as Trevor Story has decided to opt in to his contract. What does that mean moving forward? If you're looking for last-minute tickets to any sporting event or live event in general, Game Time is absolutely the place for you. There's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans for a live game. And the best ticketing app to make that happen is through Game Time, because it's cheaper than other ticketing vendors. It shows the view from your seat so you know it's not obstructed. And you'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all the fees are included, so the price you see is the price you get. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. The Boston Red Sox received some exciting news today as Trevor Story has decided to opt into the final 2 years of his contract. This shouldn't come as a huge surprise because the writing was kind of on the wall for that to happen. And Trevor Story had a really good season in 2025. So this is good news in that regard because they won't be losing that productivity that he provided. Over the course of the 2025 season, he had 654 plate appearances and 612 at-bats. He scored 91 runs, recorded 161 hits, 25 home runs, 31 stolen bases, with a 263 batting average, a 308 on base percentage, and a 433 slugging with a 741 OPS. So that's a solid stat line for Story for 2025. He took a huge leap compared to what we had seen from him in the 2023 and 2024 seasons. In 2023, Story had 168 plate appearances, significantly less than the 654 in 2025, 158 at-bats compared to 612. 12 runs scored, 32 hits, 3 home runs, 10 stolen bases, a 203 average, a 350 on-base percentage, and a 316 slugging. So 2023, he didn't play that much because he was hurt. Similar story in 2024. He dealt with an injury in April that kept him sidelined for nearly the rest of the season. 106 plate appearances that season with 94 at-bats. So he played the least that year with 8 runs scored, 24 hits, 2 home runs, 6 stolen bases, a 255 average, a 340 on base percentage, and a 394 slugging with a 734 OPS. So his batting average went from a 255 in 2024 to a 263 in 2025, and he had a lot more at-bats in 2025. Moral of the story with that, Trevor Story needed to just be healthy. The fact that he hadn't had a fully healthy season in Boston was definitely holding him back. And he had said before the 2025 season, I really want to get the chance to show the Boston fan base why I'm here and why they should be happy to have me here. And health was a huge part of that for him. And in the 2025 season, he definitely showcased a lot of strengths. His base running in particular, his base running run value was in the 98th percentile, and he broke an American League record for stolen bases. And the Red Sox are a team that, because they don't rely heavily on home runs, because they just don't have a lot of home run heavy hitters in the lineup right now, relying on small ball and manufacturing runs is a big part of the Red Sox's mantra. And Trevor Story is a guy who provides value in that regard, because if you have people who are fast in the lineup, they can be aggressive on the base paths and they can start to try to manufacture runs for your team. And that's something that Trevor Story is so good at. And average exit velocity, he was in the 82nd percentile in 2025. So he was hitting the ball hard. One thing I will say, he still needs to improve significantly on his chase percentage and his strikeouts. He was in just the 12th percentile for both of those, which means he was striking out at a rate much higher than a lot of other players. And why is that? Because he was swinging and missing a lot, because he was chasing pitches outside the strike zone. And Trevor Story still does that. And during the 2025 season, there were so many times in which he was at the plate and we really needed him to come through, and he would go fishing at a ball in the dirt and strike out. That drives me absolutely insane with Trevor Story. Insane. And it's something that he's been doing for a long time. So I'm hoping that he can cut down a little bit on that going into 2026. But Trevor Story had a really strong season overall, and at the plate, he was producing at a high level, which is something the Red Sox really needed, and an aspect of his game that they were hoping to unlock, but hadn't quite unlocked yet. So I'm really happy that he was able to execute offensively a lot. And there were times, even though I talked about him swinging at balls in the dirt, there were also plenty of times in which he would be the guy to come through when the Red Sox really needed somebody. And that was what I really appreciated about Trevor Story. So a lot of aspects of his game were certainly really strong for the Red Sox. And overall, he was still a very good defender. Late in the season, there were misplays that he made, but overall, he was really strong defensively at shortstop, and that's definitely what the Red Sox need moving forward from him, is those strong defensive skills. But Trevor Story opting in is big for the Red Sox, because I talked about on the show what it would mean for Boston if he were to opt out. And if he were to opt out, that would likely have meant that Marcelo Mayer would start the season at shortstop, and then the Red Sox would still be left once again with a question mark at second base as to who's going to play there. So now this eliminates that possibility of Marcelo Mayer starting the season at shortstop. Trevor Story is coming back, which means, where does Marcelo Mayer play? Now, to nobody's surprise, Alex Bregman the other day opted out, which again was also expected. I talked about it on the podcast. This isn't ruling out him coming back. He just wants the Red Sox to restructure his contract a little bit if they do bring him back, or he wants to see what other types of options he'll get in free agency. I don't know how many offers he'll actually get or how many teams will be jumping to sign him, because of the fact that he did struggle a lot when he came back from his injury in the later part of the season last year. So I'm not sure how interested teams would really be after seeing the end to his 2025 season, but maybe other teams would be interested. And if he were to leave, then that would mean that Marcelo Mayer likely would be starting the season at third base, and then the Red Sox figure out who it makes sense to start at second base. Do they believe in Christian Campbell to play there? Do they go and acquire a second baseman during the rest of this offseason? It still leaves some question marks. So a lot of this is based still more on Alex Bregman and what he decides to do, because if Alex Bregman comes back to the Boston Red Sox, he will play third base again, which means that Marcelo Mayer could get the nod at second base to start the season, assuming he's healthy. Because Marcelo Mayer obviously missed the later part of the season with an injury. So if he's able to come back healthy to start the season in 2026, that would mean that likely his position would be second base. And then if Trevor Story or Alex Bregman were to experience an injury, then he would probably switch over to one of their positions. But that also kind of roadblocks Christian Campbell in a way if the Red Sox want to get him back to the majors, unless they feel like they want him to play first base and they believe in the combination of him and Casas once he's eventually healthy to play first base together. Or they still look to trade Tristan Casas and they kind of make Christian Campbell the everyday first baseman. So there are still a lot of questions when it comes to this, but it is good to know that the Red Sox have solidified one part of their infield by Trevor Story staying. And not only was his play in 2025 so valuable for this Red Sox team, but it's also the off the field leadership. Him doing his infield camp during the offseason with guys coming throughout the Red Sox organization to prepare themselves for spring training. That is being a leader. Leading by example, motivating guys to get out there and come and work on things and get some reps in together before the season. That is being a leader, a veteran who has had to overcome a lot with his injury history, but is still out there staying positive and approaching each day and giving 100%. That is being a leader. Trevor Story is a leader for this Red Sox team, and it would really hurt if they were to lose that because this team is still young. This team still has a lot of players on it who are still learning the ropes of what their role is actually going to be in Major League Baseball and how they need to step up at the Major League level to perform the very best that they can. And Trevor Story is somebody who, because he's a veteran with experience and just has had a lot of highs and a lot of lows over the course of his career, he's somebody who could help players out. And, Trevor Story spent so much of his career in Colorado. So then him making that transition from a much smaller market team to Boston, that could be challenging for players. And Trevor Story could provide that type of feedback to these younger players on this Red Sox team by saying, things change when you go from a smaller market to a bigger market, or if you're experiencing right now what it's like to play in this big of a market, here's how you can take away some of that pressure and still be able to perform in games. So there's a lot about Trevor Story that I really like, and a lot of reasons why him coming back is a very good thing for this Boston Red Sox team. Now, there's no guarantee that he's going to have the same season offensively as he had in 2025. He very well might not. So that's something that the Red Sox are going to have to keep in mind when it comes to the rest of their offseason, is continuing to try to work to acquire bats. But his defense alone and the fact that he really helped shore up that infield defense, plus the leadership that he showed, is all good for the Boston Red Sox to have on this team. So he is going to keep playing for the Red Sox, going to see through the final 2 years of his contract. And speaking of contracts, Jarren Duran and the Red Sox agreed to a deal for the 2026 season. I'm going to be talking about it next. It's always good to be right. And you can get paid to make the right decisions on Prize Picks. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season. Whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both, there's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. It really is good to be right, and why not try to get paid by also being right? So if this all sounds like a good deal to you, don't hesitate to download the FanDuel app today and start making lots of money. Jarren Duran is a name who has obviously been thrown around in trade conversations for a while now, really leading all the way back to last offseason. There was a lot of talk about whether the Red Sox were going to move him or decide to keep him. They decided to keep him. And then again at the trade deadline, there was also more talk of him being moved. The Red Sox also then decided that they are not moving him. So now that it's the offseason again, the chances of him being moved are a lot more likely. At the trade deadline, Craig Breslow probably didn't want to break up the chemistry that this Red Sox team had when it came to being a team that could potentially go to the postseason and make a deep run. He wanted to keep things relatively the way they were because he didn't want to risk trading somebody away and completely ruining that chemistry. So now that that's no longer the case because they're in between seasons, this is the time where potentially they could make a trade and it wouldn't impact team chemistry because they're going to have new faces on the team next year anyway. So, yes, the chances are still high of him getting traded, but the Red Sox did agree to terms with him on a 2026 contract to avoid arbitration. So, they ended up deciding to decline his $8 million option for the season, but they quickly reached a new one-year agreement that will pay him a base salary of $7.7 million for next year and includes $75,000 in potential bonuses. He'll receive a $100,000 buyout for the option not getting picked up, and he will get $25,000 bonuses for 450, 500, and 550 plate appearances. So that will continue to increase. He'll get more $25,000 bonuses essentially that he's collecting for more of those milestones that he hits. He wouldn't have been a free agent even without this agreement because instead he would have gone through the arbitration process. So essentially, that means that players who have 3 or more years of major league service, but less than 6 years of major league service at that point become eligible for salary arbitration if they do not already have a contract for the next season. So essentially, you have to have played for at least 3 years, but less than 6. It's during that window to be able to become eligible for arbitration. Players who have less than 3, but more than 2 years of service time can also become arbitration eligible if they meet certain criteria. And essentially, what happens is players and clubs negotiate over salaries, primarily based on comparable players who have signed contracts in recent seasons. A player's salary can indeed be reduced in arbitration, with 20% being the maximum amount by which a salary can be cut. So it's basically a longer, detailed discussion of being able to work out a contract for the next year. If the club and the player have not agreed on a salary by a deadline, which is typically in mid-January, then the club and player must exchange salary players for the upcoming season. So basically just exchanging different numbers to see what they had in mind. And after the figures are exchanged, a hearing is scheduled typically in February. And if no 1 year or multi-year settlement can be reached by the hearing date, then the case is then brought before a panel of arbitrators. So it's just this huge process because after hearing arguments from both sides, the panel then selects either the salary figure of the player or the club, but not one in between. And that'll essentially be the player's salary for the upcoming season. The week prior to the exchange of arbitration figures is when the vast majority of arbitration cases are avoided, either by agreeing to a one or multi-year contract. Multi-year deals in these instances serve as a means to avoid arbitration for each season that is covered under the new contract. Once a player does become eligible for salary arbitration, he's then eligible each offseason, assuming he's tendered a contract until he then reaches 6 years of major league service. And then at that point, the player becomes eligible for free agency. So long story short, because Jarren Duran is still in that arbitration eligible window, that means that this process would have to happen if the Red Sox and him couldn't agree on a deal. But they did agree to one for 2026. So this won't have to happen with the arbitration process. After a breakout season in 2024 in which he was named MVP of the All-Star game and slashed .285 with a .342 on base percentage and .492 slugging with 48 doubles, 14 triples, 21 homers, and 34 stolen bases. He unfortunately did lack the same consistency in 2025 as his wins against replacement went from 8.7 to 4.7. In 150 games and 696 plate appearances, he had a batting line of .256, .332, .442. So the .332 on base percentage and .442 slugging with 41 doubles, 13 triples, 16 homers, and 24 stolen bases. So that's obviously not as good as what he had in 2024, but he still had really positive aspects to his game. He led the American League in triples while ranking third in doubles and sixth in extra base hits with 70 because he's super fast. His speed is something that's always going to be an upside to his game that any team would benefit from. Given that the Red Sox do have outfield depth, though, with Duran and Ceddanne Rafaela and Wilyer Abreu, and not to mention Rookie of the Year finalist Roman Anthony, it will be interesting to see if Craig Breslow makes a move to alleviate the logjam. And of that group, Roman's the one who is really untouchable, truly. And they're probably not going to move Ceddanne either because they gave him this contract extension and they made it clear that they really want his defense in the outfield. So in 510 games for the Red Sox over 5 seasons, Duran has a 267 average with 50 homers, 226 RBIs, and 91 stolen bases. So he could be the most likely option to be moved. So don't read too much into this contract situation for 2026. It doesn't mean he's not going to get traded. It just means that they avoided arbitration, but he still very well could be on the trading block. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. But thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Red Sox and making it your first listen of every single day. Next, be sure to check out Locked On MLB with host Paul Sullivan, aka Sully, who talks about all things going on around the league. If you want to know who could be potential options for the Red Sox, tune into that show next wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I'll catch you on the flip side.